everyone. Welcome back to the Israel Connection. I'm Esti Zenati, and my very special guest today is Ambassador Yechiel Leiter. He's the Israeli ambassador to the United States. On January 27, 2025, Dr. Yechiel Leiter became Israel's 21st ambassador to the United States. A longtime public figure, he has held key roles, including advisor to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, Chief of Staff to Finance Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Deputy Director General to the Ministry of Education. He is the father of 8 and grandfather of many. Dr. Leiter's eldest son, Major Moshe Leiter, a doctor, IAF officer, and a father of 6, fell in the line of duty after leading IDF forces into Gaza on November 10, 2023. Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much for being with me today.
Good to be with you, Esti, on the Israel Connection.
Yes.
I like the sound of that, Israel Connection.
Yes, it's good. Everything we connect, every episode is connected to Israel. Every guest is connected to Israel somehow.
Good for you.
Yes. So first, let's start by getting to know you a little bit for those who don't know much about you. You've had a long career in the public service. What first drew you into this kind of work, and how did that path lead to becoming Israel's ambassador?
Well, I never saw a pathway to becoming Israel's ambassador. I had no intentions whatsoever of going back into public life. I left public life at about 2012, about 12, 13 years ago. I went on to teaching and went into the private sector, having spent about 10, 12 years in the public sector in Israel, in the government agencies. As you mentioned before, I won't go back over them. Yeah. And I had full intentions of continuing teaching, working in consultancy. I did a lot of work in developing countries in South America and Africa. It was riveting work. And I intended to coast the rest of my time in that direction. But when I lost my oldest son, who led forces into Gaza as a response to October 7th, you have to make a decision in life. And when the prime minister called, he had asked me to take several positions over the past decade, which I refused. But you have to make a decision to go on living. And part of my decision to go back into public life was really for my son. Mm-hmm. He was my oldest and the first one to call me dad. And he was a great man. And I have the feeling that I have to go on living for him. Yeah. So that was my decision to go back into public life. And the prime minister said, I want you to go to Washington. It took me about 30 seconds to consult with my son, Moshe, may he rest in peace. And he told me to get up and go. So here I am.
Well, that's great. We're glad you're here.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
So now that you are in Washington, what are your main goals as an ambassador, and what do you hope to accomplish during your time here?
Look, there's an awful lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. We're in the middle of a 7-front war. We have, of course, the head of the snake, Iran, which is directing proxies such as the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, various different Hezbollahs. There's Hezbollah Lebanon, Hezbollah Syria, Hezbollah Iraq, and of course, an attempt to stir the pot in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem. So it's a 7-front war, and there's the 8th front. The 8th front is the front of diplomacy, because Israel is in a state now where there are many forces working to delegitimize us and to demonize us. So it's a battle, the fight for Israel's legitimacy. Mm-hmm. People say to me, you hear people often say, well, we respect Israel's right to defend itself. Well, thank you very much. Would you ever say, to Belgium, we respect Belgium's right to defend itself? Well, of course, we don't need anybody's approval to defend ourselves or for our right to exist. So my first goal is to protect, defend, and advance Israel's very legitimacy. And that begins with the understanding that we are not colonizers. We're not occupiers. We're not interlopers. So my first day here at the embassy, I was told that I have to submit a letter to the Secretary of State before I can present my credentials to the president. Mm-hmm. And my staff brought in a wonderful letter that they had prepared for me, but I sensed that it was a lot of cut and paste from my predecessors. So I said, give me a few minutes. I want to write my own letter. Because for me, a kid coming from Scranton, Pennsylvania, now representing the state of Israel in Washington, it was a historic moment. So I sat down and I wrote the first sentence, which was, I represent a people indigenous to the land of Israel. And I think really from that sentence, everything flows. I'm not a stranger to the land of Israel. My people, Jewish people, are not strangers to the land of Israel. 2,000 years before there was a geographic location deemed by the Romans as Palestine, there was Abraham who ascended the land of Israel. And there's a story of Genesis, the story of Exodus, is a story of the bond between the people of Israel and the land of Israel, which had a Jewish commonwealth for close to 1,000 years between the two temples and the two sovereign governments we had here. So this is a return of the Jewish people, and historically we also never left. So again, I represent the people indigenous to the land of Israel. Don't call me an occupier. If you want to say that we have disputed territory, okay, there's another side claiming it for themselves. It can be called disputed, but we are not, occupying anybody else's land.
Right.
Once you understand that, once that there's a legitimate debate over how the future should be architected, then that's okay. But if we begin from a status of occupier, of colonizer, then there's nothing that we can do that's right, and there's nothing that the other side can do that's wrong. So that's why you see on October 8th, even college professors, university professors celebrating the slaughter of the Jewish communities in the Gaza envelope. Why? Well, because we're not legitimate. And if we're not legitimate, then pretty much anything is legitimate to be done to us. So the battle begins with an unapologetic, unambiguous, unequivocal statement. We are not here as colonizers. We're here as we are indigenous to the land of Israel, the people of Israel, the land of Israel.
Yep, and that's true. I mean, I wish we had more people realizing that right now. Right now, it's what we see on on college campuses and on the streets and everything. It's been terrifying.
And the approach, I just want to point out, as you said, my goals, in terms of goals,
yes,
is to put that in the context of a bipartisan message. It's very, very important that we maintain bipartisan support. It's difficult. There's a very partisan atmosphere now in Washington. The atmosphere is not conducive to bipartisan activity. But nevertheless, Israel, both for tactical political reasons and really for ideological reasons, must be bipartisan. We could have a Democratic Congress in 2 years. We don't want to lose the Democratic Party. But also for ideological reasons, Israel should be bipartisan. Israel is a bipartisan issue. It always has been, and we want to maintain that. It belongs to everybody. Everybody belongs to it. We are very much in identification with the goals and values and interests of the United States of America as a whole. So this partnership that's blossomed over the past 77 years needs to be maintained, and I do everything that I possibly can every day. As a matter of fact, I depart the office shortly for the Hill. I go to Congress. It's always a bipartisan day. I meet half the day with Democrats, half the day with Republicans. Very often, it's not separated by lunch. It's kind of intertwined. So I'm roving from one side of the aisle to the other, and I do so as seamlessly as I can, because I believe that really Israel is a bipartisan issue.
It is, yes. And so speaking of that, how would you describe the U.S.-Israel relationship today? And what do you think is working well? And where do you see room for growth or deeper understanding?
Look, the relationship is very good. It's very close. I'd say that we're in a tango. And if you point out to the differences at times, or the glitches that we have in our relationship, it's because when you dance a tango, you can step on each other's toes a little bit. and that's okay. That's normal. But the relationship is a good one because our values and our interests are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, it's on both sides of the aisle, but particularly the administration has been very, very favorable, very, very friendly. As soon as I reached Washington, the first issue we had to confront was the issue of slow walking munitions that already been purchased. During a seven-front war, we had people like Bernie Sanders trying to level an embargo of arms against us. Imagine that, an ally trying to embargo an ally in the middle of a fight for its life. So there were people in the system that, slow walked the munitions that had already been purchased. And what we had to do was, free it up. And the administration was very, very agile at getting the train back on the tracks and putting things in order so that we could move ahead with the munitions that we needed. And really pretty much on every level, there's a very, very close and dear relationship. We have to move it to the next level. We are confronting this issue of international demonization of Israel. We've had the International Criminal Court deem our leadership war criminals, our soldiers war criminals. And we have the United States now sanctioning the ICC. There was the first round. Now there was just a second round a few days ago of sanctions. Another 4 judges in the ICC. And this is going to continue until they stop. This demonization of Israel has to stop. And today we also had an egregious step taken by Great Britain to sanction two of our ministers. This is something which is absolutely intolerable. These are democratically elected government in Israel. This is a coalition government. And even the accusations are completely inaccurate. The fact of the matter is that we are working very hard to supply humanitarian, to distribute humanitarian aid and food. Nobody has starved and in Gaza. And we're doing everything we can to circumvent Hamas. That's the point. But we're not putting the distribution through Hamas as it was in the past. We're choosing a different avenue. So the accusations made by the British Foreign Secretary are absolutely unacceptable. We're not going to accept it without a response. There's certainly a response from the government of Israel. And it is going to be worth it for countries to cease and desist because, they're upping the ante and they're creating confrontation, which is totally unnecessary.
Yeah. So in the region right now that is constantly shifting in the Middle East, what role do you see Israel playing in the broader Middle East, and both now and looking ahead?
Well, Esti, there's people always ask me about the Abraham Accords. Will the Abraham Accords expand? And it's important to understand that within the Muslim world, there is a contest going on regarding reformation. Islam never had a reformation like Christianity did 500 years ago. And now there's an issue within the Arab world and the Muslim world, really, about whether or not to reform, to accommodate Western civilization, to accommodate the Judeo-Christian civilization. Those who are in favor within the Muslim world of accommodating of a reformation within Islam are willing and actually interested enthusiastically about making peace with Israel. And that's why what we saw in the Abraham Accords, we saw those countries who fought off the extremism of the Arab Spring, who fought off the Muslim Brotherhood, who are fighting off Iranian influence, are making peace with Israel without conditions. And it's been a warm peace, and it's been a sustainable one, even though we've been at war with Iranian proxies for a year and a half. So those who oppose accommodating Western civilization, those who oppose accommodating the Judeo-Christian world, are opposed to any kind of accommodation with Israel.
Right.
They actually pursue continued confrontation with Israel. So it's imperative for us to defeat those elements within the Muslim world so that the moderates who are interested in accommodation will be strengthened. And that's really what this confrontation is all about. If we are successful in diminishing Iranian influence, Iranian power, then the moderates will rise. And there'll be greater amount of peace, not only in the Middle East with Israel, but in the world as a whole, because Israel represents that Judeo-Christian civilization.
Do you think that's something that could happen in the next 5 to 10 years, or do you think this is something that it's going to take?
I think it's absolutely going to happen, because there is certainly a commitment on our part to diminishing the power of the extremists. Look, we are dramatically diminishing Hamas. We have diminished the power and influence of Hezbollah over Lebanon. Lebanon is now committed to disarming Hezbollah. We toppled the regime in Syria as a result of our efforts against Hezbollah. And, it's changing the region. And that's why you've got the Houthis on their heels trying to diminish what we've done by firing missiles all the time. But they're going to fail. And at some point, the threat coming out of Iran is going to be neutralized. And therefore, I think that we're going to see very positive developments in terms of accommodating Israel. I think that we may even see, people always ask about normalization with Saudi Arabia. We may even see accommodations between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria in the context of the Abraham Accords before Saudi Arabia. We have no serious territorial issues with Lebanon. We can, finesse the border issues we have. There's some issues there, Lebanon and Syria, but there are no territorial claims we have in Syria. We just want to see a Syria in which minorities are defended, are protected. We see stability. We don't see jihadi troops anywhere near our border. After October 8th, we have a different concept of border security. We're not going to allow jihadis to be at our border. So we've got to see that all of that is properly finessed, and there's no reason why we can't move into a mode of Abraham Accords with Lebanon and Syria, even before Saudi Arabia. Not to mention other Muslim countries like Indonesia. Why in the world can't we have a peaceful relationship with Indonesia? Many African countries with large Muslim populations that could benefit greatly from the knowledge we have in economic development and agricultural development, in healthcare and otherwise.
It seems like right now there's a shift in, with the Middle Eastern countries' relations with Israel versus the West relations with Israel right now, in terms of the people, especially when you see all those protests and all the Western countries protesting for Hamas and all these terrorist regimes and against Israel. But then in the Middle East, a lot of these countries, they want to kick out the Muslim Brotherhood. They want to kick out all the extremists. Why do you think that's happening right now?
Well, I think that goes back to the point I made before about the battle within Islam over extremism versus moderation. And, there's a scholar in the UAE by the name of Jamal al-Suwaidi. He's actually a minister in the government, and he wrote a book about how the UAE dealt with the Arab Spring and neutralizing the Muslim Brotherhood in the country. And they were very, very aggressive, assertive in removing Muslim Brotherhood activists from the educational system, from the civil service. And look, they created an atmosphere where you can go, I went with my keepa. I spent a lot of time in Abu Dhabi with think tanks, with government ministers, with my interlocutors on a daily basis. And I felt more comfortable with my kippah there in Abu Dhabi than I do in many, American cities, sorry to say it, or certainly European cities. So they created this atmosphere successfully, and it deserves a tremendous degree of credit, and it could be copied elsewhere. It should be copied elsewhere.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of Israelis have been going there in the past few years. And I think it's the only Muslim country Israelis can go into with Israeli passports.
Well, Bahrain.
Oh, Bahrain also. Oh,
Bahrain, Morocco.
yes, Morocco, right.
Yeah, very,
Well,
very.
my mom grew up in Morocco. My dad was born there, but then
Whereabouts?
in Marrakesh.
Marrakesh. Very
Yes.
nice.
Yeah. So as an ambassador, you interact with a wide range of American Jews, some of whom hold very different ideas, when it comes to Israel. How do you approach these conversations and work to build bridges within the community?
I work to build bridges by building bridges. It means going out to the community. I mean, every weekend, I leave Washington for a different community around the United States. I touch down. I meet with local media, not just national media, local media. I meet with student leadership. Jewish students have confronted an awful lot over the past year and a half in campus life. I meet with Jewish students, and sometimes just a general meeting with students on campus. Excuse me, I've been nursing a cold now for several weeks.
Oh.
I meet with multi-denominational synagogues. I just came back from Atlanta. I began with the Reform Temple, went on to Conservative Temple, and then to Orthodox temples. Sunday, I go to churches. And as far as the Muslim community is concerned, there's a lot of outreach. I had an iftar, a dinner in my home, my residence, the ambassador's residence, and we had leadership of the Muslim community. Several imams came. We prayed together for the release of our hostages. So the way to do outreach is to outreach. Is not to stay pent up in Washington. I do the Hill, the administration, politicking, but as often as possible, reach out to communities, all types of communities, not only in Washington, but around the United States.
Okay. So on a more serious note, on May 21st, the embassy suffered devastating loss of two of its diplomats, Sarah Milgrim and Yaron Lischinsky. May they rest in peace. They were gunned down outside an AGC event. First of all, I want to express my deepest condolences to you and your staff and their families. We could only imagine how devastating it was. And as a community, as a whole community, we were very devastated hearing about the tragic event. How have you and your staff been coping with this tragedy?
Look, the story of the Jewish people is a story of turning pain into perseverance, of angst into action, of hopelessness into hopefulness. We have no choice. That's what we've been doing throughout our history. It was a terribly painful night. Brought me back to the night when I got the knock on the door, told me that my oldest son had fallen in Gaza. I got the call that two of our employees had been shot. It was a devastating night. I can tell you that Yaron worked just a few doors down from me. I saw him almost every day, quiet, unassuming, highly intelligent, highly capable. Sarah, a beautiful young lady who would come in every morning and just brighten up everybody's day with her smile, with her ability to organize different communities and connect them with the embassy. Just so wonderful, such a beautiful couple. And they were gunned down here in the middle of the capital of Western civilization, really.
Yeah.
It was really horrific. And but I got to the scene about an hour after the occurrence. I was met there by the Attorney General Pam Bondi and the attorney for the region, Judge Janine Shapiro. Excuse me. And as I arrived, the president called Ms. Bondi and asked to speak with me. Had a conversation with President Trump, who expressed his outrage. And as I was there, of course, Kash Patel from the FBI called, and it seems that the administration is very, very committed to getting on top of this and to stemming the tide of anti-Semitism. I know Leo Terrell very well, Attorney Leo Terrell, who's been appointed the special counsel within the Department of Justice to combat anti-Semitism, the special envoy against anti-Semitism, Yehuda Kaplun, working hand in hand to see what we can do. It's important to emphasize, though, that this is not something that's been created in a vacuum.
Right.
If you call Israel an apartheid state and committing genocide, and the prime minister guilty of war crimes, and our soldiers guilty of war crimes, you're going to have somebody crazy who's going to, pick up a gun and act on that. And the battle against anti-Semitism begins with the battle against anti-Israelism, anti-Zionism. This claim, that people say, well, we're not against Jews, we're just against Zionists. No, there's Zionism and Judaism are one. Judaism began with the connection between the Jewish people, as I said before, and the land of Israel.
Right.
So don't please, anti-Semite, don't define for me what Judaism is.
Right.
The vast majority of Jews, yes, we have our fringes. We try to make a distinction between Judaism and Zionism, but that's not mainstream Judaism. Of all the denominations, people see the land of Israel is central to the Jewish civilizational experience. And that's something that nobody can take away from us.
Right. And that's something that I think we prove during our holidays. All of our holidays are connected to Israel one way or another. And when you celebrate these holidays, you celebrate the land of Israel.
Our holidays are connected specifically to the land. They're agricultural holidays, right? The holiday of harvest we just have, Chag HaKatzir. We have Sukkot, is Chag HaAsif, the holiday of the gathering of the grains and the fruits and so on. So of course they're also very, very connected to the seasons. Passover has to be Chag HaAviv, the holiday of the spring. That's why we have a leap year, so we can align the lunar calendar with the Gregorian calendar. Every 3 years we have a leap year because the lunar calendar loses 11 days to the Gregorian calendar every year, because it has to be seasonal, and the seasonal holidays are related to the seasons in the land of Israel. So everything we have is really land connected, land oriented. The sanctity of Jerusalem and the importance of the cities where our prophets roamed and taught brought the world a new message of ethics and morality.
Yeah. So about a week and a half after that attack, we had another attack in Boulder, Colorado. And then a few days after, the FBI issued a warning to all Israelis and Jews, a security warning. How is the embassy responding to that warning, and what message do you have for those feeling fearful and vulnerable right now?
People cannot live in fear. I've lived in Judea and Samaria almost all of my life since I'm 18. I've confronted one intifada after another, and one thing I've seen is that the way that the people of Israel were able to persevere is to get beyond fear. To every day go about one's daily life, whether it's sending the children to school, going to work, facing those rocks and Molotov cocktails on the roads. If you succumb to fear, you're succumbing to the terrorists who are trying to accomplish just that. They want to make you afraid. What we've got to do is go about our lives. Jews have must continue to go to their schools and their community centers, their synagogues, their temples, and the Jewish organizations, and precautions obviously have to be taken.
Yeah,
we have to not turn a blind eye to the dangers, but at the same time we have to be committed to moving our lives forward and not succumbing to fear, because that's exactly where the terrorists want to put us. They put us in a position where we'll stop being who we are, and the first step to confronting that is accentuating exactly who we are and not succumbing to terrorism.
Yeah. A lot of times when there's a warning like that, the Israeli government issues a warning to the people coming to the US or Europe, wherever it is, and telling them to remove any Jewish signs or necklaces with the Star of David or an Israeli flag. Do you think people should do that to hide themselves kind of, or do you think we should
Well, look, Esti, I'm not in the habit of making recommendations to people and telling them how to live their lives. I'm a big believer in, let everybody choose for themselves how they want to conduct themselves. I think overall it's important, certainly organizationally and on a community-wide basis, not to project fear. To basically project that we are going to overcome this, and through our not succumbing to fear, that's going to be the best road to overcoming what we're confronting right now.
So on a more personal note, your son, Major Moshe Leiter, he fell in the on the line of duty on November 10, 2023. Would you be willing to share a bit about him? What kind of person was he? What kind of son?
Yeah, it's hard to do that briefly. He was my oldest, the oldest of 8 children.
Mm-hmm.
He was 39 when he was killed. He didn't have to serve. He had 6 children, and he had just completed med school. As a matter of fact,
Oh wow,
he was supposed to start his rounds, his residency, on October 8th.
oh,
Yep. He had received his white jacket in a beautiful ceremony at Ariel University in August 23, and was supposed to start right after the holiday, right after Sukkot holiday on October 8th. But of course, October 7th changed his life, as it did all of our lives.
mm-hmm.
He spent 15 years in the equivalent of America's Delta Force, what we call the Sheldag, Special Ops in the Air Force.
Yeah.
He was a very, very able commander. He was in line to become the commander of Sheldag, but in a turn of fate, I guess, in 2014, he was sent to guarantee the security of the doctors who were sent to the Philippines after the earthquake. And when he saw the doctors there, this is what he told me when he came back from the trip. He said, after I saw doctors, Israeli doctors, saving these people's lives, pulling them from rubble after 5 or 6 days, you see people who are virtually dead and brought back to life. He said, I want to spend the rest of my life doing that, bringing life to people. So he decided not to continue in the army after 15 years. I decided to go to med school. And I remember him telling me that. I said, Moshe, you're crazy. You're 33, at that time, 4 kids. How are you going to go through med school? And he not only went through med school, at the same time, he did 80, 90 days of reserve duty a year. He
Wow.
went through battalion commander's course, which was very demanding. And he also, for his livelihood, also ran a program of inducting young Haredi men into an intelligence unit, which was failing until he took it over, and he turned it into a fantastic success. The program is really the envy of so many programs within the IDF now as a whole, and that's due to his ability to bring people together. He was a big bridge builder. He just had that personality. He had a little bit of everybody in him. He was able to share himself with everybody, no matter where they came from, what their cultural background was. He was really a bonder in every respect, and it's a tremendous loss. I mean, the longing for him that I have, his siblings have, his mom, it's a physical pain, but it's something that we deal with. It's something that we have to translate into our own lives going forward, to live for him as well.
Sounds like he was a very tenacious and incredible man, that he was much needed in this world. And I'm so sorry for his loss.
He was. Well, thank you. That's my big question: how somebody who's really so needed in this world was taken from us. But
Yeah.
we leave that.
That's a question. It's a big question that unfortunately we can't answer. Yeah.
No, we have to live with questions.
Yeah. So how has his loss shaped the way you approach your work and your mission, especially in that role that is very public and demanding?
Oh, in so many ways. First of all, the tenacity, never give up, no matter how difficult the demands of the job are. I always draw from inspiration from him. I always used to say to him, look, you need your sleep. And he said, there's plenty of time to sleep in the next world. He got so much done. At his funeral, his best friend eulogized him by saying that you were 39, but you lived the life of somebody 80 years old, double your age, because you got so much done. And he never gave up on responsibility that came his way. That's one thing, tenacity. And the second thing is never giving up on bringing people together. As I said before, he was a real bonder and binder and bridge gaps between people, between ideas. And I spoke before about the need for Israel to be bipartisan. So that's part of the inspiration I get from him. What would Moshe say? How would Moshe do this? What would be his attitude and approach to a particular issue of separation, of division, of fissure. How would he bring the people or the ideas together? So I draw inspiration from him. Every morning I gird myself, put him on my shoulders, and march forward and get through the day with him as my inspiration.
Looks like he's there with you at all times.
He is right over my shoulder.
That's great. So, Ambassador, before we leave, if there's a message you'd like to leave with our listeners about Israel, your personal journey, or what gives you hope, what would that be?
Look, we are, I believe, at what I would call a Herzlian moment. What do I mean by that? Many people looked at the Dreyfus trial and didn't know what to do. And here's Theodor Herzl, who had for all of his youthful years been very alienated from his Jewishness. And he saw and identified in the anti-Semitism, this virulent anti-Semitism directed against Dreyfus, but also of the Jews, because it was, the Frenchmen screaming death to the Jews, not just to Dreyfus during the trial. And Herzl was able to say, something's changed. What do we do now? How do I move forward? And he rediscovered the connection to his people, and to the point where he was able to rise up and say, we are going to create a movement that's going to bring us back to the land. We're going to reconnect. We're going to reconstitute our peoplehood, our nationhood, the bonds between our people spread to the four corners of the earth that have been ruffled over so many centuries of exile. And he said in 5 years or 50 years. It was 50 years, and unfortunately it was following the Holocaust, but he did foresee that the state would reconstitute itself and our independent sovereignty would once again be reconstituted in the land of Israel. So if we seize the moment that we're facing now, October 7th is a Herzlian moment. We could choose to be Herzls. We can choose to say, what has changed? How are we going to change? What are we going to do differently? And move forward. We have tremendous promise in the future. If we sit by the wayside, and wait for 50 years instead of 5, well, history is going to gobble us up and move us forward anyway. But if we take the reins of destiny in hand and move forward ourselves, which is really the task we have as the Jewish people, that's the story of Abraham. Lech lecha, go forward.
Yes.
History means to take history forward, not just to be passive observers of history. So we have that opportunity now to be active arbiters of history instead of being passive observers. And I'm full of hope that certainly the young generation that is, fighting like lions, shoulder to shoulder. Think about that. We talked about unity beforehand. Let's learn from our soldiers. We don't ask each other what party they voted for, what their level of religiosity is, if at all. They're giving their blood for each other, their lives for each other, fighting in the same tank, in the same plane, walking through the same alleyways, completely united in the cause of protecting and defending Israel and the Jewish people. We must draw from their experience. We must learn from them and unite as well with their courage and conviction. And I'm full of hope for the future.
Yes, and amen to that. Hopefully we will see a brighter future for our children, for our youth, for us also. Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to be here with me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Esti, and best of luck with the Israel Connection. Connection is good.
Much. Yes. Thank you so much. Until next time, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Shalom u'bracha.